I had to have the lady cut about this much off because it was dragging the floor. And this is a good one without heels.
Yeah.
Ready.
Okay.
Start all
I'll press
over.
go in a second. Yeah, could you start over?
Okay, sure. My name is Dorothy Copp Elliott. I'm from Forestville, Maryland, which is in Prince George's County. My son was 24 years old when he was killed. He was almost home when he was stopped by one of the District Heights, Maryland municipal police officers. He was pulled over because my son was driving erratically, according to the officer. My son complied with the officer, did everything that he was told to do. He was inebriated, and he had worked on a construction job that day and had driven about 66 miles from Virginia, and he was near home when he was pulled over. He was placed on the curb, sitting in the heat for a very long time, and backup came. Backup had a ride along with him, and this backup was Wayne Cheney of the Prince George's County Police Department in Maryland, and they alleged that my son was pointing a handgun at them with his hands behind his back, sitting in the front seat of a police cruiser. And the cruiser had dark tinted windows. The chief of police of Prince George's County, Maryland, said that would not have fit their criteria. Even the search done by the police officer would not fit their criteria. But what does it take to search a tall, thin young man weighing only 165 pounds, 6'1", and with his hands behind his back? There was no reason in the world for them to take my son's life in order to preserve theirs. And he had told the first officer that all he wanted to do was to go home and just go to sleep. And I know for a fact that that's what he usually does when he's worked all day in the heat. He'd come home and just lie on the floor without taking his clothes off. And I'd say, Artie, why don't you get in bed and take your clothes off and go to bed? He said, no, Mom, I'm tired. I just don't feel like doing it now. But when they fired those 22 shots at my son, you could see the huge bullet holes in the cruiser. And my son's body had huge bullet holes in it also, because my nephew and my sister went to the funeral home and they actually took a lot of pictures. And my nephew seems to think that it was more than 14 shots that struck my son. And we protested for 22 consecutive Wednesdays at the courthouse in Upper Marlboro, trying to get the current state's attorney to reopen the case. We also did a 2-day march to Annapolis, Maryland, to get the then Glendenning to reopen the case. But we've had a long struggle, and in the beginning, my family and I would go to the site where he was killed, and we would have what we call prayer vigils, and the media would come and question us, and Judge Elliott, who is my son's father, who resides in Portsmouth, Virginia, would come up, and we immediately start canvassing the area to see if people witnessed what happened. And this was the 18th of June, and July 4th was right around the corner. So people thought what they heard were firecrackers, but they saw the yellow tape much later and realized what had happened. I'm told that my son did not get medical attention, even though the fire station with the ambulance was nearby, but people said it took them a long time to come. And when they opened the door of that cruiser, my son, and he was seat belted in, hands behind his back, and he fell out of the cruiser after they unbuckled the seat belt, and no one saw a weapon at all. And the people who were around, the police officers, took them to the station that same night, And it took them 7 months to do their so-called investigation, and they said no charges. The officers were not indicted, and the grand jury came out shortly thereafter, and they said that, the police officers need to know when to shoot, when not to shoot. They need to know how to do a thorough search, and that there should be a report every 6 months or so to let the citizens know what's going on. Our case also went to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in Richmond, Virginia, and those 3 judges sided with the police officers for qualified immunity. I wasn't too sure what qualified immunity meant at that time, but I well know what it means now. And it was recommended we could either go to the Supreme Court or come back and have the 13 judges decide what had taken place, and overrule the 3 judge panels that heard the case. But one thing that really hindered our case, I believe, was the death of our attorney, who was well known in the area. And when he looked at the pictures of my son's body, he said, he actually asked me to go out of the room so that my nephew and he could look at them, and he was visibly shaken when I came back. He said, these officers are not only going to get some jail time, they're going to get kicked off the force. So the big blow came about 1.5 years after my son passed and Mr. Mundy died. So we tried to get other legal counsel at the time, and they said, well, they just have to start all over again, and that meant a big delay. So we decided to continue with Mr. Mundy's firm, and that attorney was not equipped to take care of our son's case. And we found that out when we went to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, because my sister was sitting behind him, and she said, Mr. Mance, it looks like you need a little help. And we knew from that point on that he missed coming to the federal courthouse in Greenbelt, was late. And he said, well, I got bothered with a snowstorm. I don't know whether he was in Texas or wherever he was, but my former husband said, this was such an important case that you should have left days early so you'd be here on time. And I often wondered how I would feel when I saw the officers who killed my son. They did not release the names immediately, never saw a picture of them, but I willingly gave my son's pictures and said he's not a statistic. He lived for 24 years, and what happened to him should not have happened. And I have spoken all over on Capitol Hill at least 2 or 3 times. Amnesty International sent me to Durban, South Africa for the World Conference on Racism, and I spoke at many forums there, and CNN covered it extensively. And I don't know what it's going to take to bring about change, and maybe the fact that George Floyd's death was the catalyst that's going to bring about change. And there's such reluctancy in trying to do anything to curb violence concerning police officers, and I know they cover up. And that was one of the things I said shortly after my son was killed. I said, I want you to do a thorough investigation and no cover-up, no cover-up. And those words just came out because I felt it was necessary to say it. After 7 months, there were no indictments. One of the officers killed again 20 months later. He was the only one on the scene that fired 1 shot, and no indictment in that case either. So I said that Prince George's County is going to remember the name of Archie Elliott III, and I speak out all the time concerning it. The media comes to me, thank God, whenever there's a case that comes up concerning police officers. And there was a case very recently, just about a year ago, where the young man was handcuffed and placed in the front seat of a cruiser simply because he had hit a couple of cars and the police were on the scene at the time. They put this man in the front seat of the cruiser, handcuffed, and an officer got in the front seat with him and shot him 6 or 7 times. And the police officer tried to bring all kinds of charges against that man, but it was a lady whose car that was hit. She videotaped it, And the attorneys for William Green, that was the name of the young man, he was 43, I believe, and she said, I have evidence that it didn't happen that way. And you know, the chief of police and the county executive came out and said, well, you know, we're going to charge the police officer. And they did charge him, and he's still in jail now. And the family was awarded, I don't know, $20 or $28 million. And the family says no amount of money will bring them justice because they wanted their son and cousins to be alive. And I started a scholarship fund for my son, and remember, it's called the Archie Elliott III Scholarship Fund. And it didn't grow like I wanted it to. Usually when I go around and speak, sometimes I would ask for a donation, and sometimes I didn't. So it took a long time, but I just awarded close to $10,000 to 5 students who are going to attend HBCUs. That's one of the requirements for it. And I will award at least 4 during the month of July. Normally I would do it during June, but we're still going through our 4th county executive to try to get them to reopen the case and to try to get rid of some of these no good elected officials who seem to be favoring the FOP or police officers. And as Judge Elliott said, the police do a horrible job of policing themselves. And that's why they have a consent decree that lasts at least 5 years. I think that was about 5 years ago when they had it. But Prince George's County was notorious for killing black males. And it hasn't stopped. It's nationwide, it's citywide. So, you know, it goes on. And when we went to the visual where Cordale Handy was killed and the names were being read, it was so chilling. I don't know where those names came from, but I said I could add at least 10 names on a list that we have for Prince George's County, and it needs to stop. Police officers need to be held accountable, and I'm told that if you're so afraid of black people, why are you on the force? And I think a lot of them have the mentality that nothing is going to happen to them, so they're free to do whatever they want to do. And that's not right. And I think more and more people are seeing that changes need to come about, because who wants to lose a loved one? I mean, it just comes out of the blue. And I had no idea that fate would have happened the way it did to my son. And I just see his smile all the time, and I talk to him. And on the day of his death, for the last couple of years, I said, I'm going to mourn, I'm going to cry if I have to, but I'm going to keep moving. And he died a day before my birthday. He had been out planning my birthday the night before, so I didn't see him. And it was horrible, horrendous, when I was told by the police, do you have a son named Archie Elliott? I said, yes, I do. He said, well, we're coming over. I said, why are you coming over? He said, we're coming over. I said, he's dead, isn't he? They still didn't answer. But I knew, because if he had been injured, they would have said, your son is in a hospital, you know, you need to get there. And I guess I just cried and cried. And my niece came shortly thereafter, and the detective was there. And so were a couple of artist friends. And she said, I told you not to tell her before we got there. I said, they didn't tell me. I just knew, you know, instinctively. And Artie's brother was almost 12 when he was killed. And we both were going outside. He was throwing up and I was screaming. And it's a feeling that you never will forget. And again, I try not to think of how he died, but to think of how he lived and wonder what would be happening with him. At this point, he would be 53 in December of this year, and he has been deceased longer than he lived. So, and my younger son just turned 39, and he has 3 little daughters, and I thought I'd never have grandchildren because I am 80 years old. I just turned 80. And but I adore those 3 little granddaughters, so I'm thankful for them. I'm thankful for my son, the younger son, who stood by me. And I know sometimes he felt like I was doing too much, perhaps, And he had a few issues himself that I attribute to his brother's death. And he doesn't speak out a lot. And sometimes we joke and laugh about things that Artie did. He was so jovial, and a lot of people loved him. And they said his current employer, who lived down the street from us, he said, Artie is just like one of my sons. You know, Artie is my son. So it was nice to hear that. And I just keep moving on and doing what I can. And it means a lot to have the support of the mothers and fathers. I'm glad fathers are getting involved more so, and the siblings too, because we need that. We need to have strong men supporting us, and we support them as well. So I'm looking forward to changes. And if there's anything that I can do to promote that change, whether it's protesting, writing letters to the state's attorney, or having meetings with them. We did have a meeting with the newest state's attorney, and she says unless you find more evidence, then she would look at the case. But as of now, there's not enough evidence to reopen the case. So that's where we stand. And I believe that was a terrible travesty of justice. And I don't like Prince George's County justice. Never have, because I just knew that justice would be served. When you look at all the circumstances in my son's case, that there is no way those officers should have walked away without any accountability whatsoever. And I thank God for allowing me to be as strong as I am. I had a lot of medical issues that were attributed to stress, anxiety. I took 2 whole years away from my teaching job because a lot of those young men or young teenagers reminded me of my son, and I just couldn't go back. And I was either told at the end of those 2 years to resign or just get permanent disability, and I wasn't ready to do that at that time, so I went back after 2 years. And I joined the Coalition for Concerned Mothers. I also have a committee for justice for Archie Elliott III. There is a website for him, and I'll do anything that I need to do to bring about justice and to continue supporting my son. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And then people can find those websites.
I have something to give you. Yeah, I'll give it to you.
Can you tell the audience where to find
okay, can I get it over there? I have it in.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
Okay.
I'll hold this for you. Yeah, she's just going to talk about the websites and stuff. So, if you're ready. Cool. So again, we're here live in downtown Minneapolis. This is Nico from Unicorn Riot. We're here outside of the Cordale Handy Banquet. Mothers are still here, family members are still here talking about their lost loved ones to police violence and police killings, and other people are sort of picking up.
I'll give you one, but you just want me to tell about...
I would love one.
Okay.
Are these the same thing?
Yes, it is,
thank
front
you.
and back. I've started a scholarship fund for my son, and I have a nice little booklet that tells you about why I started the scholarship fund. And there are 3 ways of making a payment: PayPal at Justice for Archie, or the Cash App, which says S Scholarship. I'm sorry, I can't see that. It says RD Scholarship, I believe. And the website, www.justiceforarchieelliott.com. On the reverse side, it gives the website, and also it tells you about what happened to my son. The one thing that I failed to mention on this little card is that the police officer who killed Artie killed again a second time. And no justice, no peace. And my information is at the bottom of the card for my phone number, and people can call me if they would rather pay by check. Just make it payable to the Archie Elliott Scholarship Fund and call me for the address to send it to.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
When can we see this? Is there going to be a link or something?
Yep, give me a second. Let's come over here and let's talk about that in a moment. I'm going to give the mic off to her and get her started because I think we got to go in a minute.
Okay.
But yeah, if you stick around, I'll tell
Okay,
you
I
in
will.
1 minute.
Okay.
Yep. So you can come up to like maybe around here. You can introduce yourself as to who you are. Is this your son? Hey, what's up, man?
How you doing? Yes, sir.
Who's your son?
Yes.
Okay. Talk about your son. Talk about the case. What the police narrative was. What your story is.
Carefully planned execution.
And then let's talk about his case a little bit. Like what any updates to it, and then this banquet. How has this banquet gone for you? So I'll give you the mic.
Okay, let me move this hair. That's not mine.
Ah, yeah.
Part of it is Kwamena would say, "Why do you have that hair? You got long hair." And then I say, "Because I don't have to comb that one." He used to tell me to open up the window. What about the picture? Can you hear me? So do I look into the lens?
Yeah, you can look into the camera or at me. You can talk about, introduce yourself. You don't have to if you don't want to, but you can introduce yourself. And then talk about your son and go to that.
Okay. Are we ready yet?
Yep.
Hi, I'm Miss Melody S. Cooper. My son was Kwamena Ocran. He was murdered January 8th, 2 days after the insurrection in Washington. He was actually murdered in Montgomery County, Maryland, which was in Gaithersburg, by street crime unit, plainclothes officers. They stated that they were approaching an unknown assailant because there was a tip that he had a gun. Actually, that was the cover-up for them to commit a racial hate crime, because from the witnesses, there was never any gun found, and they actually, all the while planning, from my perspective, it was a carefully planned execution of my child, because they sent someone to the door to have him walk them to the store so that they can actually set my son up for his death. Once I reached the town to speak with officers in reference to my son and in reference to identifying him, they stated that I did not need to come to town to identify my child because the police had already identified him. So I said, I think that's illegal, isn't it? Because the next of kin should be the person to identify a deceased person at the medical examiner's office. Well, I never was able to identify him at the medical examiner's office. When I called the medical examiner's office the day after his murder, they stated that I could not come and see him. And then I inquired upon his autopsy report, at which that time the lady stated that the autopsy report should be available within 5 to 6 years. And I stated, did you mean 5 to 6 months? And she says, no, 5 to 6 years. I said, okay. So obviously these officers are covering up one crime after the next. They had my son on the ground for 7.5 hours while they power washed the area. And all I could do is go and seek out people that may have seen and heard something. So initially all I did was knock on doors, ask questions, video record, and once undercover officer, she's a plainclothes officer, she also witnessed me taking videos and pictures of the crime scene. And once she noticed that I was taking pictures and videos of the crime scene, she left and came back with about 4 or 5 more undercover officers. And at that time, a forensics officer came, and they had a, what would you call it, a metal detector. And at that point, while they were searching the area where my son's body laid for 7.5 hours, they actually found 4 more bullets straight down in the ground, which exactly what I heard from the witnesses, that they stood over top of his lifeless body. After they shot him in his back, he went face down. They stood over his lifeless body and continued to shoot him in the groin area. So that was consistent with what the statements when I seen bullet holes straight down into the grass. And then the same officer that stood over top of him made jokes, and him and another officer left the scene of the crime before the uniformed officers had even arrived on site. They never had intentions on approaching my son to question. They had all intentions on executing my child upon witnessing. When he came out the door, they even fabricated a story that he was across the street in front of the police station, and they chased him across an 8-lane traffic highway, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening on a Friday. There's no way possible that story could have been correct, because that street is a 24-hour high traffic area. One of those, or maybe the 4 of them, would have been hit by a car. So basically, their whole story was fabrication about they thought he had a tip. My son was murdered because of a tip? I don't think so. My son was murdered because of a premeditated murder, because they decided that, I guess, since they were officers, that they could be above the law when police are actually supposed to protect and serve, and the only ones they were protecting at that time were themselves, while they continuously serve us black and brown people death sentences. And it was said by one of my other sons to those individuals, I will not even call them officers. My son says he misses his brother, and y'all thought his brother was going to wind up missing, but we're on to y'all neck now. And since you didn't want to give his brother his day in court, how about y'all take his place? Because you need to face the charges that you commit. You committed the crime, now do the time. And if the chief of police chooses not to step down, I want to invoke him to be fired, and I want that station to be dismantled and dismissed, because it's just one corrupt department coming out of Gaithersburg. And again, they murdered my son as a hate crime, not because they were policing. Hate crimes should not be called policing any longer. That day should have been over years ago when they freed the slaves. And all I'm going to say is there's not only going to be justice for my son, there's going to be justification. And I've already stated to the media January 24th, and I stated to the police at the police station January 9th, that there's going to be justification and ramifications. Because once I went to the House of Assembly back in February, and I was speaking up for police reform, speaking to enforce Anton's law, and also to invoke Kwamena's law, to pass a bill in my son's name to make it mandatory for all plainclothes officers to wear body camera. And as of May 17th, I did receive a phone call, I did receive emails, and I even received text message thanking me, telling me what a great job I did, because now they have implemented that all officers, plainclothes officers in the state of Maryland, is mandatory to wear body camera on duty, off duty. Whenever you're carrying a firearm, it's your duty to make sure the camera is rolling, because that's the only reason they think they're getting away with my son's murder. But I'm here to say they're not, and they won't. Kwamena Appah Fynn Ocran was 24, a happy, young, loving, caring, sharing young man that had a whole life ahead of him. He played football. He was a Maryland certified licensed roofing contractor. He had CDs. He was very intelligent, very helpful, very comical, and he was just loved by the community. And I just want to say, it's not only my son that I feel sorry for, me and my family, but all the families. And I feel sorry for people that has that closed mind, that has the prejudice in their heart, that they want to try to kill and hurt and harm black and brown people, because God made us all the same. And he didn't put us on this earth to be at war with one race or the other. He put us on this earth to be unified. And not only does Black lives matter, all lives matter.
Can I ask you a couple questions real quick?
You sure may.
Thank you so much. It's got to be really tough being so recent that it happened. Can you talk about your life since January 8th, and then also this banquet, and what was it like to be with other family members, other mothers, and other, just family in general who dealt with similar things?
Okay. Well, my life has changed tremendously since my son has passed away. I can't eat. I can't sleep. Kwamena is always in my mind. He's always in my mind. But it has motivated me to go out and help other families and to seek help in reference to these corrupt officers. And as my son Kwamena made a song, if you cut the grass, the problem is solved. We need to cut the corrupt cops out of our police stations, and their chiefs of police, they need to stop covering up for them, because once they acknowledge and discipline those officers, other officers won't continue to do so. But through my son's death, I've become involved with Concerns Mothers organization, Harriet's Wildest Dreams, Cordale's mom, a lady, Miss Kim, Boots on the Ground founder. And through them, I've gained a lot of strength. And through the Justice Department, I've learned, I find myself being involved in politics now. I never was interested in politics, but I remember my 7th grade teacher, he decided to sign me up for World Affairs Club. And I never thought that in my wildest dreams that I would be involved in politics, because politics is everything concerning to world affairs. But here I am in Minnesota because of Miss Kim and the Boots on the Ground Foundation, in which the banquet here this evening was wonderful. It was an eye-opening experience. I was able to meet other mothers again, and we are all sorority sisters now, because we didn't join this sorority. It's like being drafted into the service. We were put together. Why, I really can't explain it, but by the grace of God, we're all going to learn from each other, not only preaching but teaching as well as we learn. And this event tonight has really uplifted my heart. Actually, it's been an emotional roller coaster, because we have different meetings, and we have different counseling sessions, and it's just feeling and healing. It's a lot to feel, and now it's time to heal, which is going to be a long process. But I was grateful to be able to come here, and I've also was grateful to be blessed with a donation from Miss Kim to assist with my son's headstone because it was very costly, and what they gave me was a generous amount to go towards his headstone, and I totally appreciate everything, especially being here and to give this interview as well, to let the world know exactly what's happening to my son, because I'm sure these people in Minnesota have never heard of my son, Kwamena, Appah, Fynn, Ocran, and I've told the press, NBC, when he first died, that Montgomery County Police wanted to keep it a secret because they weren't really allowing the media. But they tried to sweep it under the rug, but I let them know that I was going to move that rug. And I'm not going to give up until they go down.
Thank you. Anything else you want to say?
Basically, that'll be it, other than thanking Miss Kim for her being herself and showing the love to the ladies like myself that experience what she has experienced, and thanking Miss Marion Gray Hopkins of Concerned Mothers Coalition, who actually escorted me here, and thanking the Silver Spring Justice Department that has been supporting my son's cause from the beginning, as well as WPFW radio station in the state of Maryland, and Harriet's Wildest Dreams, and Nene Tay of Harriet's Wildest Dreams. I want to thank all the organizations and all the volunteers, all the media coverage. I'm just thanking God that there are outlets that we can use to let our stories be known, so this will not continue to happen. So I'm going to say peace and blessings, and thank you as well.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you sharing the story.
Thank
Give
you.
you a hug. All right, we're going to do one more quick interview with Jonathan McClellan. Again, we're here live in downtown Minneapolis at the Hilton at Cordale Handy Banquet. All right, we'll just keep it brief because there's a lot of people. We got to leave.
Right,
You can hold this, and then who are you? What you've been fighting for? Bring us up to date on these 9 bills that you played a big part in drafting, or just a quick summary of the ones that might have pushed forward to the next level.
Right.
1 second. Way taller than everybody else.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
All right, go ahead. That's all you.
So the legislation that passed, we had a set of initiatives, and the only one of those initiatives that we're able to pass was no-knock warrants. That was it. Other than that, I want to say that as far as police accountability legislation goes, the people in the community got screwed this session. The silver lining in everything is that the bills that were passed in this session are alive again for next year, so that we have another crack at the apple next year. But this year we did not get no police accountability legislation bills through, and so we have to fight twice as hard next year to try to get some meaningful or substantive police reform legislation. A lot of people were discouraged by what happened. We watched as the deals were being made, and everything that we wanted was out, and that's kind of indicative of what we see is the legislation that has the most teeth is the legislation that gets attacked the most, or usually gets shelved or holds up progress. We went into a special session because of the lack of police accountability legislation. The governor and as well as the legislature made promises to everybody in the community that there would not be no a budget deal done unless they had a police accountability legislation as part of that budget. Well, it didn't happen, and the legislature the DFL legislature as well as the governor had to eat those words. So the governor, as part of trying to make good, the House proposed 30 items that he could do by executive order that would incorporate some of our legislation initiatives, and that legislation went through. Controls the BCA, and it also controls the state troopers. So he did institute some policies that will affect the state troopers, such as releasing body camera footage, requiring all officers to wear body camera footage, and because the BCA is under his purview, when they conduct an investigation, they will release the body camera footage to the families. And that's, now keep in mind that the BCA does not conduct all the investigations, but they do conduct a vast majority of those investigations. So that was a hopeful piece, but we have to codify that in the law. And that's what we're hoping to bring out next year. The statute of limitations on wrongful death was one of the main items that we were seeking. And I think the big thing is that by not passing the legislation that we proposed, what they did was give us another year to propose different legislation, and we're going to keep on proposing legislation, and those pipes are going to get clogged up. And once we take over the Senate, the legislation is going to be pushed through. We have a new bill that I wrote that Representative John Thompson is carrying that's going to start going after the money, and that bill specifically. An officer who commits a felony while under the color of law or while in uniform would lose their taxpayer portion of their pension, and that's huge because we don't have that right now. The money that they contribute to their pension, they will be able to get back plus interest, but they're not going to get the taxpayer portion of their pension, which is usually 2 times higher than what their own investment is, right now. If you look at Kim Potter, she's going to get a pension of around $5,700 a month for the rest of her life, regardless of whether or not she's convicted or not, plus interest. Derek Chauvin is going to get around $4,800 a month for the rest of his life, plus interest, and there's nothing that nobody can do about it. So we want to yank those funds away from law enforcement who break the law and can't be trusted. And we don't feel that the taxpayers should be on the hook when they make mistakes or when they kill people. So we have a lot of things that are going on. We have a lot of other initiatives in the pipeline. We're trying to push some policies, some politics, and we're getting involved at all levels to try to change the system to make it so the pipes are unclogged so our legislation can flow through the way that it's supposed to do. Because right now, Warren Limmer, who is the chair of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, has been holding up progress for the state of Minnesota for a better half of 10 years, and we have to change that individual, and we have a good shot this next election after redistricting. So I would encourage everybody to get involved in their election process, make sure that these candidates are true and hold true to what it is that they're claiming to be. If they're about that criminal justice reform, then they need to be about it, and hold them accountable, keep their feet to the fire, because we're going to be out here and we're going to be doing our part. So, to find out more information and get involved? They can contact themjc.org. Again, that's themjc.org, the Minnesota Justice Coalition. And my name is Jonathan McClellan, the president of that organization, and I'm out.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, we're going to bring the stream down.
Have a good night. Thank you for being here. You're supposed to be.
You too. Have a good one. All right, we're going to bring the stream down. This was Nico from Unicorn Riot. Thank you all for joining. That's Winston Smith's brother on the left side, hugging DJ. So you all, thank you for joining. Thank you very much. Hey, thank you.
That's what I'm waiting for. Bye, everybody.
It was good to talk to your son. Yeah. All right, you all. We're going to bring the stream down. Thank you again for joining us. And thank you for continuing to support. If you like our work, you can go to unicornriot.ninja and support from there. Again, this was a bunch of mothers and a bunch of families speaking about their truth. If you missed the banquet, we recorded that as well. And you could also continue to follow us. We will have a documentary called The Mothers coming out within the next year, spotlighting a lot of this pain and struggles that people have been going through dealing with police killings. So again, thank you all for joining. This is Nico from Unicorn Riot. We're going to bring the stream down. You all take care and have a great night. Peace, peace.